Here we go.
Hello, Brian. Oh yeah,
Sam, we're now live. Nice one.
excellent.
All
Ask
good.
anything. I'm a big fan.
Long time listener.
Yeah.
First term caller. Nice one. Okay, mate. After the slight technical glitch there. So I just wanted to do a kind of a talk session, which just with someone like yourself, you've been a residential landlord for ages now, over a decade?
Yeah,
multiple properties. 10, 11 years,
Yeah.
And so I wanted to just bring you on and talk through just some of your experiences, just because, you get lots of people with interest of becoming a residential landlord, thinking about what will it be like, how do I get into it, all that stuff. And so, that's why you're here today, mate. So
I think anyone who wants to, make investments in this, in the property market, they have to think how. Obviously, they want it to make as much money. The easiest way to make money. You've got different types of letting. Obviously, you've got HMOs. That can be very lucrative, but the work involved in it. You've got short-term tenants, really. A year in HMOs is a long time. Whereas if you're looking for, say, if you were to get a 3-bed semi-detached house, these with a family, these people tend to stay, and they look after the homes. Where HMOs are short-term tenants, they're not really too bothered. So the way, I work with my brother a lot. And the way we like to do it, that we try to aim for families, small children, families want to look after the home. So, and it's worked quite well for us. So I would say that to anybody, getting into it. For me personally, I'm not saying that the HMO, a lot of students is another thing, but
totally different game in terms of the regulations.
If you've got a full-time job, and you're trying, via regulations and like I say, that what you've got to provide for them as regards to utility bills, internet, furnishing, you have to take all these accounts. Where if you get an unfurnished house and basically the family takes care of itself, it's less maintenance basically.
So your experience has been in residential properties and on is it assured tenancy or something like that?
Yeah, that's the way. That's what we aim for. And I say most of our tenants, I think. We had one that was 9 years. Currently got one that's I think 9 years. I've just bought a property recently. The tenants have been in there. I've carried the tenants on. They've been in 6 years. So that's for me, you've got continuity. Almost, obviously, you can never guarantee rent, but you can never guarantee rent. But it's safe as houses, as they say.
Well, yeah, they are, but I've had my own experiences where it was definitely not safe, and it was definitely a traumatic experience for me. So more on that later.
Yeah, well, it's not. It hasn't always been plain sailing with what we've done. I actually live next door to. I bought a house, lived in it, and I bought the one next to it. And the tenant, we got on really well with her. And the day of the rent came, and she posted the keys through the door, and I never saw her again. She wouldn't receive a cut, return our calls. And then when we went into the property, it was a bit of a mess. So I'm not saying obviously, we have
scot-free.
Yeah, but of course you have bad experiences.
Yeah, I remember that one because that was your first place, and
yeah,
that was years ago. But early on, kind of what lessons did you learn? Kind of what surprised you early on when you became like a landlord, and well, especially as they were living next door, but kind of any kind of hard lessons or hard truths?
Yeah, because when you get to know these people, you take them as face value. And she originally, she came with a partner and a son, and like I said, that's the dynamic that we tend to look for. So you think with the son, she would, she'd look after the house. I mean, probably naivety on my point of view. I didn't really check because they were next door. I thought, well, how much more, what can go wrong, really. Yeah, so it obviously taught me a lesson in that sense.
Yeah.
But, yeah, like I said, a bit disappointed, really, and then bad judge of character. But
yeah, I mean, because you manage yourself,
yes.
Your properties, you manage yourself. Whereas, like, when I moved out of the first house I bought, and I rented that via an agent who I didn't have experience with, and like you say, the naivety of it was that I didn't follow up with the agent in terms of they were quite new, quite small, and I didn't really follow up or check out them for their long-term history, and also the like the checks that they were doing, the credit checks and things like that. So that turned out to be a learning curve from early on, is that going through that process, and especially if you do give it to a management, an agency to manage.
We were quite lucky. I say I've done a lot with my brother in that sense, and in the tenants that we had, it rolled quite nicely. So it was not a lot of maintenance. So and over time you get better at it. I mean, these letting agents, they don't really do anything. You can say what you want, but there's not a lot to it, and they're taking the cream basically. And then, like you say, in your experiences, when you do encounter difficulties, they put their hands up and they say, oh, it's not our problem. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, well, that's what you're paying them for, so you might as well do it yourself. Like I said, it's all right for me sitting here because I've been quite lucky, but like I said, these letting agents, they're not for me.
I've had a better experience since that first one, and it was a newcomer. I think since then I've gone with a larger one with a bit more kind of rigor in what they do. So
yeah,
I've had a better experience since then, and continue to work with them on other places. But I've got a question here from Simon, and it was like he's talking about what do you do for refurb. And do you look to add value in refurb or fitting before you let, or kind of what do you look for? I guess how do you pick the properties?
Yeah, you want to make it livable for you want to make it nice for the tenants, and that's what we expect. When they leave, we want it back how we got it. But you make it a nice place, hopefully, touch wood, they will keep it a nice place. As regards to improving and thinking of the resale, that in the late 90s, early 2000s, people were doing this, but they were saying, "Oh, look, we're refurbing a house and making good money." Well, the property market was just going. It wasn't necessarily the refurb; it's because the market was going crazy. So now, for people to do that, I'm not saying you can't make money at it, but it's harder because you've got stamp duty on second homes now. It's 5%. I know I'll exclude the current holiday that we've got. It's an extra 3% on. I can't. To be fair, on
your second home, yeah.
On your second, but up to it, it's
second or multiple,
up to $500,000 or something. But just say it's 5%. So on 140,000, it's it's 7,000. Yeah, that's £7,000 plus your solicitors' fees, your surveys, whatever, so £140,000 house is actually £150,000 house. If you do it up, fair enough, if you're a handyman, then you can save some money. But if you pay someone to do that, then say if it's just 15 grand, so it's 165 now. Then you go and sell it, and then you put it up for 180. So there's 15 grand there, but then the estate agent takes a chunk. Then you've got to pay solicitors again. So yeah, you buy it for 140, you sell it for 180, but how much profit? By the end of it, you know, so people who are going into this, it's a long-term game. It's long term. I can't see it unless you do get a steal, you know, unless you get a council property, you know, right to buy, you know, get it well below the market value, then do it up, and it makes it sellable. But there's not many of them about. Maybe not in the Midlands, in this area, you know, maybe London, you know, I mean, London's just crazy. So, yeah.
Yes, I mean, I think, I mean, the example you just gave there, like quick maths on that was like 10% gross, and then you've got, like you say, fees on top of that, solicitors' fees, whatnot, you know, the agents' fees, capital gains. So
that's what I mean. Did I even mention capital gains? I mean, they're talking. That's another thing now. Is 18% on lower rating and 28 on higher. So 18%. Yeah. But that looks like it's going up again. That looks obviously with the budget in. I mean, I didn't even mention that. So by the time, like you say, 140,000, you sell it for 180. There's not a lot left for you, is there?
Yeah, so that's how it will affect the individuals. Potentially 18 and 28 going up to 20% and 40% to match income tax bands. But you know, and then I guess we don't know how anyone that's letting under a company and what effect you know, corporate tax rates will change or anything. You know, we just don't know yet. So that will also affect those guys, because not everyone does it. You know, many people set up a limited company in order to do this.
Yeah.
But that's interesting, because you're talking about the long-term gain there, and you've got obviously the capital gain that's you know, potentially there in the longer term, and then obviously the more immediate is your income, is your yields that you know, your gross yield from renting on a yearly basis. Do you think that those yields are quite? You have to be quite careful in terms of expenditure in order to preserve them.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, people talk about getting, you know, new builds and like no maintenance, and obviously, you know, if you get, say, you've got an old boiler and you have to change your boiler and it costs you 2 or 3 grand, then obviously, you know, if just talking, for instance, say if it's you know, you're getting £650 a month rent. You know, it's 3 months rent, isn't it, or more? It depends on how much the new boiler is. But this is why rents are so high as well, because of the you know, because everything's going up now, expensive everything is. You know, going back to the, you know, making profit on a house, I will say the pro for buying a house is I don't think, especially in this area, if house prices did drop, they wouldn't go below. You wouldn't lose a great deal on them. And then by the time, you know, obviously we're in a recession now, it would come round again like the last recession. In 2008, prices in London, they did drop massively, but around this area, 10, 20 grand tops, and it soon recovered. You know, so I wouldn't worry, you know, people losing money on these.
On the capital side of things.
Eventually. I mean, obviously, it's certain circumstances if you had to sell, but no. Cool.
So, like, when you do look at buying a property and you're thinking about a buy-to-let, what features do you look for in the property? I know you've mentioned, you know, how to navigate the cost side of things. Any kind of general tips about the condition?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it helps. You know, the area that I live in. That's where you have to know the area. You've got to look at, you know, how you can sell it. You know how popular the area is, and then like you say, you're always going to view the property, how well, you know, what kind of condition it's in, and then you're going to get more clientele on. You're going to get more people interested in them things.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to note, like, what the makeup of the residents are. So, like you say, if you're looking at a family or a young family, then you're tending to look at smaller, say a semi or a terrace property. Maybe you won't go for flats then yourself, and also you might not look in, say, a neighbourhood where the demographics like over 50s or over 60s, you kind of find your sweet spot in terms of.
Yeah, I mean, I won't rule out flats altogether. But yeah, like you say, it's you until you saw it, that's when you make the decision. You get a general feel for it. I say you're not always right though.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Like my experience in apartments, you've got further costs to consider, and I think any new landlord who wants to get a buy to let with a flat, and especially in a city with kind of like high traffic, high upkeep costs. If you look at Birmingham, for example, and some of the kind of the residential apartment blocks that were built in 2000s, mid 2000s ish, really popular places, and for the yields that you were picking up, say 5 or plus years ago, they were really worth the investment. And what's happened is with inflation, as with rising costs in some of those places, the service charges have really taken off. And where you had some of them as well, relatively cheaper, they're all kind of up to scratch now in what they charge in service charges, and that can be multiple thousands a year easily.
I mean, that's something I haven't got any experience. Obviously, I'm not in a big city like Birmingham, London, so I can't really speak on that behalf because I have no experience in that in flat. So.
Yeah, it's definitely worth considering. If I just take an example of a city centre, flat in Birmingham, which you could potentially, one bed for a rough figure of about £800 a month. Once you factor in things like your mortgage, and which could be, let's just roughly say 250 on a mortgage for 100 grand, and I'm not 100 grand now, because these flats now go for about 150 for a one bed, or depending, give or take. Some people will disagree, but so you've got that mortgage, but service charge in this case come in, and these, like I say, now these are picked up to be a few £1,000s a year. So monthly, although you might pay them quarterly, but monthly you're talking about another 300
what we spoke about earlier, these are short-term tenants as well. So even though the yields monthly might go £800, £1,000, that's great, but then they only stay for a year, and then you get into the flat and it's wrecked. So it takes you a few weeks to do it up, and then you've got to get more tenants in, and usually they have, they've got to give their month's notice, haven't they, somewhere else. So you've just lost 2 months' rent by getting it ready and getting somebody new in. So these short-term, like flats, say I stay well away from them. If you're changing tenants every year, you're losing that that monthly, a couple of months. You're losing a couple of months a year in rent, and like you say, the service charges and whatnot. Like I say, you have to do the maths. You have to make sure it's not just something that people want to do it. They can't just jump into it, and because that's what everybody thinks. Everybody thinks, oh yeah, everyone makes a load of money from it. Well, it isn't. When it rolls nicely, yeah, great, but it doesn't always roll nicely. So yeah, that's something that they have to think about.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, good point. The fact that when you have a vacant property, you're still paying council tax on that property, and you're also losing out on your income, and obviously your outgoings don't change as well in terms of mortgage, whatnot. So it's a good point there. The time that you're vacant there, that's coming straight out of your income and your yearly yield.
Yeah.
So how are we doing for time?
I'm fine. If you have any more questions, if you don't, I'll go to bed.
9-ish.
I'll get my hot water. That'll be me done.
Tough day, eh?
Yeah.
What do you think? What do you think the next few years has in store for residential landlords?
Well, as the property, obviously, people are struggling to buy houses, so it's going to be. I say lucrative. It's going to be busy. There isn't enough houses, so you're always going to have the clients there. There's always going to be people needed to rent, so you're never going to be short, of people looking. And they can't build houses fast enough, basically. So that it's not, and like it's what we spoke about earlier. That's why the rents are going up, because people are struggling. I say with the government brought in the extra 3% charge on second homes. Landlords can't claim back the mortgage against their profits. It's a good thing about the government, because even though it's not a good thing for somebody like me, but looking at the bigger picture, for people who can't afford that, they're trying to cool the market down. They're trying to make sure that people like myself don't go and buy all the properties or all the land, because eventually then, I say the average person, they can't afford a house.
Get onto that.
Yeah, so it brings, it makes sure that the market doesn't go, go above what people can.
Too hot.
Yeah.
Yeah, cooling it down. Yeah, so the used to be where you could literally count your whole finance cost, your whole mortgage payment on your rental property was, you'd be able to deduct that as an expense, and therefore, your tax liability is lower, right? And now, I think the last year you could do that was last year, wasn't it? So last year you could do 25%.
Yeah. Of
your finance costs could be counted as a cost and deducted from your income.
Yeah.
Now you can't do that. So from April 2020 you couldn't do that. Yeah. So yeah, definitely brings it back into a little bit of
it's like
a consideration.
Yeah, no, it cools the market, and it's a good thing. But obviously, like you say, going into people who are looking into it, they're probably not aware the extra 3%, and then obviously you put on top of your 2% on. I say I'm not off the top of my head. It's not too sure about the bands, but you talk what we spoke about earlier on 140,000. It's an extra 7,000. So and part of the time all your fees, it's £140,000 house,
yeah.
£150,000 house.
Yeah, it's a lot of cash, because when you look at your deposit that you get for a house, and you can do a 5%. And if you're lucky, you get 5% because they're coming back, or 10%. But then, this extra stamp for anyone that's doing it, it's just cash outlay that they need, right? So it's automatically doubled what they need to be able to do it. So really good consideration there, and definitely worth pointing out. So I think we'll end it there, mate. Thanks a lot for joining, and
thanks, Brian.
Hopefully we'll have some more of these, and we'll structure it a bit, maybe, see what questions there are, whatever, or if you've got something in mind you want to bring up.
Yeah.
But it's going to be an interesting year anyway, with kind of what's going on. So yeah, we'll watch this space. Thanks again, Sam, for joining me tonight.
See you later.
Cheers.